This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, January 29, 2019 North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. I'd first like to ask our chaplain, Chaplain Jim Detweiler, to please step forward and provide an opening prayer for the Fire Commission's new year.
Such an honor to serve our department and our town as a chaplain for our fire department. And I would encourage all of us as we watch on television, it's great to pray tonight, but I would hope that every time we hear a siren, whether it be police or fire, that you'd pause whatever you're doing and lift up a prayer for our first responders as they go about the business of keeping us safe here in the town of North Haven. So let's pray together tonight for our first responders and for our Fire Commission year, that we have a safe year and a prosperous year. Heavenly Father, we are praying today for our firefighters who hold dangerous jobs. Their lives often hang in the balance. We pray that when they face danger, that you will be their safety and their stronghold. When they feel inadequate, assure them that they can do all things through your strength. We pray when they are troubled that you would give them your perfect peace in every way. When they are exhausted, give them your strength to not be weary. When they feel overwhelmed, may your grace always be sufficient. When things seem impossible, remind them that nothing is impossible with you. When they don't know what to do, let your word be a lamp to their feet and a light to their path. When they are in trouble, be their ever-present help. When they are confused, give them a sound mind. When they are afraid, let them trust in you. When their heart grows faint, be their rock. And finally, we declare in prayer when they walk through the fire that they will not be burned. We pray this in your great name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain, and thank you for your service to our department and to the residents and visitors of our town. You're there in their greatest time of need, and we certainly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. We have the great pleasure this evening of having a swearing-in ceremony, which is always a thrill for our Fire Commission. And I see many family members and friends here of the persons who are going to be sworn in. I just want you all to know that we are truly blessed to have them volunteer their services to the residents and visitors and business owners of our town. And for you who are the family members, we appreciate you sharing your loved ones with us. It's a sacrifice. I know when holidays or birthdays or whatever it might take place, and the tone goes off, they're gone, and they're going to be missed. And we want you to know that we truly appreciate your effort as family members, and certainly their efforts as volunteers for our town. Without them, we can't do it. As we're all aware, we only have 8 full-time firefighters per shift, and the volunteers are a critical component of the town of North Haven to assure both from the fire suppression standpoint and from the medical standpoint that we perform the duties that we're sworn to perform. So on behalf of this commission, I thank each and every one of you, family members, and for the firefighters who are going to be sworn in. If you would be kind enough to please step forward, I will administer the oath. Once the oath is administered, Chief Januszewski will have a few words. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Connecticut and the rules and regulations of the North Haven Fire Department as written and amended by the Board of Fire Commissioners, and that I will faithfully
and I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge the duties of volunteer firefighter
discharge the duties of volunteer firefighter
of the North Haven Fire Department
of the North Haven Fire Department
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, welcome aboard. Please accept congratulations from each of the commissioners.
Congratulations and good luck. Thank you. Congratulations and good luck. Congratulations and good luck. Congratulations and good luck.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Chief?
So again, you see these occur in waves, and that's in large part because what we do now is we await for volunteers to complete the Firefighter 1 curriculum, so that's why you see a number of them all having appearing before you this evening. Pass rate for Fire 1 isn't necessarily 100%. It's probably somewhere around 70 to 80% that actually pass the course and are able to join on as regular members of the department. So with that, their probation and shields will go away, and they'll be full-fledged members of the fire department. And we thank them for their service. We thank their families for allowing them to attend class several nights and some weekends over the last several months. Some of them have even attended the Gateway Community College and have received college credit for Fire 1. So we commend them for that as well. So looking forward to having you stick around for a number of years. Thank you.
Absolutely. Family or friends that are here, if you wish, you can certainly stay for our business meeting. If you wish to leave and have dinner, please feel free. Feel free.
Just give it a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wants to stop.
I'd like to resume the Tuesday, January 29th, 2019 Fire Commission meeting. I'll ask for the approval of the minutes of the Board of Fire Commission meeting held on December 18th.
So move.
Second. Do I hear a second? Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Vote. So moved. And I'll also ask for a motion to accept a special meeting that was held on January 15, 2019.
So move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. The chief's report.
Chief's report for this month. We're going to cover alarms first. Year-to-date for alarms as of 2018 at this time was 397. Year-to-date for alarms as of this time, 367. It's the first time I think I've spoken of a decrease in a number of years. Likely attributed to a storm or something else that may have happened last January. So we'll be right back up there again. I'm confident of it. 5-year difference from 2014 is 348 alarms, so a difference of 19 additional alarms at this time. Since our last Board of Fire Commission meeting, provided ALS intercepts to the hospital on 24 different occasions, and we also had 24 incidents to the highway, incident responses to the highway. 65% of our calls were EMS related, and since our last meeting, we've had 6 incidents which the fire department experienced a delay in responding to a medical incident or a motor vehicle accident, and we had an additional 6 incidents in which the fire department had no apparatus to send to a medical incident or a motor vehicle accident, which meant that the ambulance provider responded solo. Approximately 582 incidents since our last meeting, 133 of which were overlapping, which accounts for 23%. That covers the alarms. Current budget, as of this time last year, we were at 66.1%. Current day, we're at 66.2%. So we're right on target with budget. Since our last Board of Fire Commission meeting, we've collected $15,368 in permit fees, bringing our overall figure this fiscal year to $336,816. Fire Marshal's report, again, covering since our last meeting, 45 inspections, 15 re-inspections for a total of 60 inspections, 19 code violations were found, 16 corrected thus far. We've issued 3 abatement orders, and since our last meeting, we've reviewed 85 different plan reviews or permits. Training since our last meeting, we've been able to train on some rope rescue techniques, self-contained breathing apparatus. This is due in large part to If you recall, we had to use SCBA's from Stanford for a period of time. They were slightly different than what we had already, so there was some training that went into that. And we took advantage of some of the cold weather that we had for a brief period of time and conducted some ice rescue drills. That's what I have for training. I have a few matters for executive session, and that's all I have for Chief's report.
Thank you. Any questions of the chief regarding his report?
Just one quick question. On the overall for our permit fees since the inception, what's it, about 16, 18 months?
I don't have that number with me tonight,
Okay.
but I can find it. I know we talked about it in several meetings, but it's
Way up,
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million, almost 3/4. That's over $100,000 a month that he's taking in. I think that's an outstanding job. It's just outstanding.
Well, when you think about a department that never had a revenue source and generated revenue when we had strictly expense,
Correct.
it's a tremendous asset to the town. There's no question about it.
You know, it doesn't sound like much, but when you start breaking it down, $1.5 million to $100,000 to $25,000 a week to $5,000 a day, $5,000 a day, that's a lot of money.
Yes, it certainly is.
So that's a great job, Chief, and the inspector is doing a fantastic job, Jim. The whole department is.
Chief, where are we holding the ice rescue?
So it's on the 2 ladder trucks. The drills or the equipment?
Drills.
Drills, to be honest with you, for the most part, we try to train over here at the Quinnipiac campus. Their security gives us access to train there. It's a relatively clean environment, and it's out of the way for us.
Very good.
How many trips to the highway do we make?
To the highway, I had 24 incidents on the highway
24.
between this meeting and our last meeting.
And the 3 abatement orders, could you explain what that means?
Sure. So an abatement order takes place. So let's take us back a step further. So the inspections that take place are inspections that occur at regular intervals, 1 to 4 years, with most properties falling on a 1 to 3 year basis. The inspections are done because a property is due. The inspector will arrive on scene, conduct a code and life safety inspection, and find violations that have occurred. We send out letters citing the violations, asking for them to be corrected, and in many cases they're not. And in many cases they are, but in some cases they're not. At which point a re-inspection occurs. We find the violations haven't been corrected, and we file an abatement order. So the abatement order is basically a court order at that point to correct the issues. It has a time limit to it, anywhere typically from 0 to 60 days to abide by the abatement order. And if that doesn't take place, then we can extend it if certain parameters are met, or we can file for an arrest warrant, and then the remedy is held in court.
So these 3, have any exceeded 60 days?
So again, it could be 0 to 60 days. It really kind of depends on the complexity of what's being asked. So if they haven't exceeded the time yet, then no, it would be you'd see the arrest warrant be one for this past period.
So and they're arrested, where do they go? Housing court, criminal court?
They go to housing court in New Haven.
And what could the worst possible scenario?
So typically court consists
Property
of...
taken away from them? Or?
So typically the court seeks compliance. So typically court's going to have the landlord present, perhaps an attorney present most often, and then the prosecutor for the state represents the interests of the town of North Haven and the fire department. We collectively go to court and we cite what's taken place. We have to show record of letters that have been issued and that have been signed for and so forth. And typically the court will require that at that point, of course, a remedy of action and give the individual so much time to comply. And then there's a series of court dates. I mean, some of these can go on for a dozen court dates.
It seemed to me that if you're going to pay to have the lawyers and everybody go to court on numerous occasions, you might as well fix your property or whatever you're supposed to be
And
doing.
that's usually what happens, right? It's typically they will take care of it themselves.
Okay. So there isn't a case where in the criminal justice system, an abatement would mean seizure of the property by the state's attorney's office because there's too much drug activity going on.
No.
Or that kind of thing. But that doesn't happen here. The
Not
town
from the-
doesn't take.
Not through the fire marshal's office, no.
All right.
And it's my understanding that the fire department gives the property owner sufficient time to remedy the problem. And obviously, once it gets to that point where you're going to court, they've had a significant period of time in order to attempt to remedy the problem and just didn't respond or certainly didn't do any work or sufficient work.
Yeah, it really depends on the severity of the violation that's found. So if it's an imminent danger, we have some parameters to take corrective actions right then and there with the court with 4 hours notice. If it's something that can wait and the risk of injury is not as intense, then we can typically allow some period of time for compliance. It really all depends.
Okay. Any other questions of the chief regarding his report? No. If not, I'll accept a motion to accept.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Correspondence.
Other than the normal day-to-day correspondence, I have two that kind of stood out. I have a thank you letter for an individual who we treated for a seizure at their residence, and I have another thank you letter from the family of Howie Capetta for our support to him and his family throughout the services.
Any commissioners receive any written or verbal communications?
No.
Discussion of unfinished business for the department.
So I have two items on your agenda. I'll start with the replacement of damaged equipment. This is resulting from the Defco Park Road incident, alarm number 184176. Happy to report that 95% of the equipment that was damaged has arrived, has been placed into service at the fire department. It's been quite a task to account for all the damage, account for all the delivery of the new equipment, account for the equipment we had that we were borrowing for a period of time, because all this information needs to be tracked and tested. Air packs are in, they're placed in service. All of the PPE, the structural firefighter gear, is in with a couple of minor alterations that are needed. We're waiting on a couple of meters and cameras and so forth, but other than that, I'd say 90–95% of the equipment is in, it's in service, and it's in the hands of the insurance company at this point.
Okay. That was a tremendous task, and I know the DEP and your administrative assistant there worked diligently to record all of the equipment that was damaged, and certainly all the new equipment coming in, and it was a mammoth task to go through. So certainly on behalf of the commission, thank you for that effort. And please pass our thanks on to
I certainly will.
on to the administrative assistant there. Chief, the budget presentation?
So budget presentation, I just wanted to cover with the commission quickly the workshop which took place on January 19th. Went on for some period of time, and there was quite a bit of dialogue that went back and forth. I'd encourage all the commissioners, if you haven't had an opportunity yet to view it, to please do so. We'll continue to work through the process with the Board of Finance and answer any questions that they may have.
Any questions of the chief regarding unfinished business?
I hate to be the only one who always brings it up, but I guess one of the members of the Board of Finance last week at your budgetary meeting, I guess Pat said you have a tough time controlling your board, and you don't silence your board. Well, I think that's what makes you a good chairman, because you don't silence your board. Otherwise, why would we have a board? We only have you.
Correct.
And it seems like he was a runaway cannon. I mean, I didn't think that the budgetary meeting was supposed to include a recap, item by item, line by line, word by word, period by period, of all that went on, okay? He kind of chopped our budget, he chopped our department up, and I think that it was just uncalled for and unnecessary. I don't understand what all the departments in town, I'm not going to single out any one department other than our own, okay, because that's all we're accountable for, has to go through the scrutiny or the embarrassment that we have to go through. You're a seasoned officer. You're a chief of a department. He comes in, and I'm going to say he comes in because it didn't seem like the entire board was beating this up. It seemed like just one person was beating this up. And nitpicked on every single item And I have the greatest respect for that man. I'm going to say Mike is a great guy. I know him for years. I have the utmost respect for him. I like him personally. This is not personal. This is business. He attacked the department on items he knows nothing about. I don't remember him in 24 plus years I've been on this board. I don't remember seeing him at a fire commission meeting to ask a question, to answer a question, or for support, okay? But yet he turns around and he breaks up every single line item. You know, I'll go from backwards forward, I guess. He wants to know why we have a shift of 24 hours opposing the old shift, 3 on, 3 off. He thinks that they get better coverage with 3 on and 3 off. How do you get better coverage with 3 on and 3 off if you have the same amount of men on 24 hours? And he's talking about that the men are tired after 24 hours. Well, I remember 20 years ago when we had 27 men, we were going for a 28th, and we kept having holdovers and order-ins, and we had guys on 5 tricks. That was sleep deprivation. And after the union, everyone did a survey, they felt that after 36 hours, yeah, you do have some sleep deprivation problems, and you do get a little worried. You're not as sharp as you are the first hour you're on the job. We all know that. But we're not running 36, 48-hour shifts, 60-hour shifts. We're running the 24-hour shifts, okay? And hopefully, we like to say that our guys do get a couple of hours to calm down and regroup, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. So that's one of the items that he's trying to tell you how to run the department. He's trying to tell you where to put a paramedic, how to put a paramedic, how the town would be best served. I don't think that he has any kind of a medical degree. I don't think he's even gone to a class to listen to an EMT class, let alone a paramedic class. I don't think he's going to a first aid class. So how do you know where a paramedic goes? How could you say that because we have less volunteers in the daytime, we should put on our paramedics only on the day and not on night? What if someone gets a heart attack at night? We're supposed to say, well, too bad. We're going to try and see if we can get somebody, but we can't. Volunteers don't do medical calls anyways. We have the best volunteer department in the state of Connecticut, but we don't do volunteer calls. We don't do medical calls. And that's on both sides. The board didn't want it to happen, and when we did ask, the volunteers did not want to participate. So he doesn't have an idea about that. You know, I went on the last time, and I don't mean to just beat up everyone. I'm sure everyone's heard it time and time again. But we have a department that's run by the top guys in the area. The most schooling, most training, most available knowledge sits on that board right there, okay, the 3 of you. And I respect the Board of Finance. They're supposed to keep, you know, a hold on money, but not a stranglehold, and not where they're jeopardizing the fire department and the people of this town. We just said we have overlapping calls. We have incidents where we can't get, or 6 delays, 6 we couldn't get to because we don't have the time. We have 20 overlapping. We have 24 runs to the hospital this month, 24 highway incidents. I mean, does he understand? Does he look at these before he says it? You know, then he wants to bring up the hose testing. Why is he I don't see him micromanaging the tree department. We should have a 24-inch saw instead of an 18-inch saw, or a 36 so we can cut a bigger limb. I don't understand that. Why are we micromanaging who tests our hose? Who knows better than you? You've tested hoses before. We have 2 deputies there, also with equal training. We have a training officer who knows everything about it. I mean, what is he trying to say? And you brought up a good part, and I'm going backwards a little bit. I've always said the late Chief Aubert was way far beyond anybody could imagine. He had a vision 30 years down the road. What Chief Aubert talked about 25 years ago, you're the first chief that's actually bringing it up, bringing it forward, and not putting the brakes on or kicking the can down the road. And that's why you're being attacked, because you're not taking a back seat. You're going forward because you want the betterment for the department, both the trained men, the career men, and the volunteers, and the citizens and the visitors of this town. That's why you're there. That's why you were put there to be the chief. That's why you have 2 deputy chiefs equally as responsible. So we have a runaway on a Board of Finance that's bringing this up at a workshop meeting. He wants to bring AMR in, okay? Again, I'm trying to go backwards with all the notes. It was a very lengthy meeting. Yes, I do have that little steam in me when I see the department and the board get beat up. I don't really like it, okay? They won't commit to coming in 10 minutes. They will not give us a guarantee to commit in 10 minutes. They will not give us a guarantee to put a paramedic. But yet, the Board of Finance is saying, well, if we pay them, if we buy them, we give them the money, they're going to do it. Well, how do you know they're going to do it? They're already telling you that they're not. So now you want to pay them to have them just give you, okay, we'll try our best and not show up. And then if the money that we're going to spend on AMR and only get at best a late response for a medical call, we have no fire suppression on the other side, when we could put on extra men and have both. So instead of spending the dime on one, we spend the dime on two. So I don't understand why this is coming down to, I want to put my thumb on the fire department. I want to put my thumb on the fire department. I just don't understand it. You brought up the part about the taxes, and I believe that it was Rich Monaco who said, and I'll quote him, "It's your department, run it your way." He said it twice in that meeting. It's your department, run it your way. Well, if that's what he's saying on television, and that's what he's advocating to his board, why is his board challenging him and saying that they want to do it? Which way is it? Is the board going to cut the cloth to fit the pattern today and tomorrow cut the pattern to fit the cloth? Which way are they going to do this? You brought up an interesting, scenario about the tax money. You're putting on a firefighter for $5 a month more in taxes. Do you think that anyone in this town would care for $5 a month to have that kind of coverage where you have a fire suppression firefighter on and you have a paramedic on? I mean, listen, I'm a taxpayer here. I'm a senior citizen like most of us on this board, okay, with a fixed income. I don't want to throw money away, but this is not. This is an investment in our future, in our lives. We want to have the town built up. We want to have economic development. We want to put buildings up. We want to put up apartments, more schooling, okay, facilities, more businesses, more single-family dwellings. Well, we have to protect those people. We have to protect them. And protection doesn't come cheap. But in this case, $5 for a firefighter, yes, let's go to a referendum. He said, let the people decide. Let's go to a referendum. The townspeople, and the chairman has said this several times, have always looked at the fire department as a saving grace. And I do not believe there's one person in this town that would not be in favor, Chief, of giving you the men that we need and the apparatus. Again, we have cross-trained men that we could put on, that we haven't put on, that we need to put on, rather than go look and spend money on an outside medical carrier that we cannot control once we hire and pay for them. We no longer could control them. We could only ask. And if they don't show up, what are you going to do? Pull their contract? I don't think so, because I'm sure there'll be clauses in there that'll last 10 years in arbitration. Okay? He talks about the union, why we can't put men on. That's why we have a union. We have a union so outsiders can't come in and say, we'll do what we want, and we're going to break the union. No, we're not going to break the union. You've already, and the union has already helped, and you, Chief, your board has already come down. You want to run a three-man engine. You know that's squeaky, but you want to bend a little bit. You want to make the compromise. You want to help. You want to encourage the people to come forward and help us. They just want to build a wall, and they don't want us to come even, let alone over it or around it. They don't even want us to come up to the wall. So, I mean, that's how I feel. I think that they're way out of line. Again, to go right back to the original, they don't micromanage any other department in this town. And not that they should, We have a police chief that does a fantastic job. He doesn't need to be micromanaged by no stretch of the imagination, okay? We don't need one in Public Works with Lynn and Victor. We don't need it. Board of Ed doesn't need them. They're there to see that we don't throw money away, that we bid things properly, that we do the right thing. That's all. They're not there to micromanage. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a chief. You wouldn't need a board of commissioners. We would just have one person, and they'd run the whole town. And that would be it. And I'm sorry if I rambled on a bit, but I get very upset when an outsider comes after this department.
Well, I appreciate your comments. Very well said. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments regarding the workshop? I'd certainly like to say something. I truly believe that the comments were inappropriate. The venue was inappropriate. I think if there was discussion regarding the proposal by the subcommittee that we read here and responded to, and we read our response to the subcommittee, if there was an issue, I think it should have been taken up here at our Board of Fire Commission. Certainly, I invite all commission, Finance Committee members, especially Mr. Hallahan, if he has specific questions, to come to our next Fire Commission meeting so that we could have a spirited discussion. I truly believe that the Board of Finance does a marvelous job, and I say this every workshop. It's a daunting task to allocate the monies to the various departments and for the needs of this town. And everyone wants the max for the minimum. I use the TJ Maxx slogan all the time also. I mean, but you just can't get the most amount with the least as far as fire suppression and medical services are concerned. So I, like you, Commissioner Criscuolo, certainly have advocated in the past to have the residents of this town come to a conclusion either through a referendum. And we clearly indicated during the last workshop that we would be willing to have a systematic growth of the department if the Board of Finance felt that they would be able to commit to bringing on 2 firefighters this year, two firefighters next year, and another 2 in the future years, until we reach the appropriate number of firefighters that we need to support the call volume of our town. I think that would be appropriate. You know, there's been a lot of discussion as to safer grants and how successful we could be if we were looking to apply for X number versus Y number. Granted, if the larger that number is, the better the opportunity is to obtain a federal grant. But ultimately, the residents of this town will be responsible to underwrite the cost after that grant expires. We truly understand that. The residents understand it. As you said, we're all taxpayers, and we need to evaluate, you know, the Board of Finance needs to evaluate where the monies need to be allocated. We truly presented, I believe the chief presented again this year, a very informative, detailed, statistically accurate overview of what the call volume is and what the activity of our department is and what the future growth of this department will be, predicated on what the existing similar businesses that are in town currently that are being compared to the future businesses that are coming in. And we used an example of a hotel, additional housing, senior housing. So the chief looked at the historical call volume of each of the existing buildings that are in town and compared that to what the new structures would be, and with an anticipation of enhanced call volume. And I think he did that very strategically and very detailed. I certainly was impressed by it, and I think many of the members of the Board of Finance were impressed by it, as many of our residents were. And whether or not that has fallen on deaf ears, I don't know. Again, there's a daunting task that the Board of Finance has. Our commission has a fiduciary responsibility to articulate the public safety needs as it pertains to fire suppression and medical services. Their responsibilities are financial. And so we need to come to some kind of a meeting of the minds as to what is necessary to perform the duties that we have been sworn to provide. I said it before and I'll say it again. I resent the fact that they're dictating to our chief as to how to operate our department. They are the senior managers, they have the education, they have the years of skill and expertise. I believe that everyone who's making those suggestions are doing it in the best interest of our town, and with all their heart, they believe that they're doing things the right way. But the truth of the matter is, they're not senior managers of the fire departments. They're not in this department, they're not running this department. They can certainly make their recommendations, but the sole responsibility is in the hands of these three senior managers and this Board of Fire Commission, so that we are able to perform the duties that we see fit. And I'm hopeful that after all of this is said and done, that the Board of Finance evaluates the presentation that our chief presented, and they come up with a solution. I think they have been moved by the statistical information that has been presented. It will depend on the bucket of monies that they have available and what will be allocated to our department as well as to the rest of the departments throughout the town. So I see that, and if we could, again, agree to have some form of systematic hiring of additional personnel that is not a major impact on the taxpayers of the town all at one time, I think that is something that our department could work with. Our chief has indicated that he could work with that type of scenario from the personnel standpoint, as we are beginning to look at allocating money for apparatus, so that way we're not buying an apparatus for an emergency purchase that is the wrong size, the wrong engine, the wrong equipment, and it's going to cost us money down the line, and it's not going to serve us for the years that we need it to serve. So we need to do things in a business-like manner. I think this commission has been working in that way. I know Mike Frieda has been certainly running the town in that manner, as our senior managers have. Hopefully the Board of Finance, again, evaluates the call volume, the request, and the statistics that the chief presented, and they come up with a formula to support our department.
I'd just like to make
Yes.
one comment about the workshop. I had a question, I forget when the meeting was, I don't know if it was in December or November, when there was discussion about this task force to study the fire department. And when I asked why it was the fire department, I was told that it was owned by the first selectman, that it was at his instruction to find out how we could best spend the $140,000 that was going to be carried over, which made sense to me. However, at the workshop meeting, it became clear to me, and as Mr. Holleran explained, that any department that's going to ask for a 25% increase in personnel is going to certainly have a task force or whatever they wanted to call it, to study that. Well, which is it? Was it the $140,000 to determine how that was going to be spent, or was it because there was a request for 6 new firefighters? You know, the two stories just didn't jive, and I found that to be quite unusual. So that was my only comment regarding that.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. I'd like to make one other comment, and Commissioner Criscola, you brought up Chief O'Bear's name. I mentioned during the workshop that I believe that Chief O'Bear was a visionary. He provided a report that is 25 years old, that projected what this department needs would be then. And those needs are what the chief is requesting today. He talked about the growth in Montauk. He talked about the need for additional personnel. He talked about, an enhanced apparatus, enhancing the apparatus and eliminating the aged apparatus. And there was a comment that didn't sit well with me. And the comment was, well, that's only one person's opinion. Yeah. Well, it so happened that it was the fire chief's opinion. And that opinion had value, had weight, as this fire chief's opinion has value and has weight. And I resented that comment. Chief Aubert was a learned person. There is a wing at the University of New Haven named after him because of his years of educational dedication to young persons that were striving to be in the fire department. And the truth of the matter is, I thought that was a shameful comment about Chief Aubert. And I'm hopeful that there'll be an apology to that. But I think, again, Chief Aubert was a visionary, and I certainly valued what his thinking was then and what our chief's thinking is today.
Mr. Chairman,
I would like to add something to that. Sure,
Yes,
Mr.
yes,
Chairman.
Commissioner.
I was a volunteer under several chiefs, and they were all good, and they all knew their business. Okay? Not to single anyone out, but that's my feelings. Every one of them knew what was going on, and they were all good.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to say one thing. I'm glad you brought that up, and I didn't touch on it too much before. But when I first came on as a commissioner, Chief Aubert was here. Trust me, you're right, an extremely learned man. He did not deserve a comment like that. He was so far ahead of time. He was programming Universal Drive 25 years ago. He had this whole town set up where we needed coverage. And again, the chief said they just dug that out. His two boys dug it out. The chief has been on this same program for the last 2-3 years, and now it comes out, we find some of the old scripts. So he's actually in the same footstep. And let me tell you, let me call him the great Chief Aubert. I want to say that. He put me in line several times as a new commissioner, trust me.
You probably needed it.
And I needed it, I'm sure, but that's why I'm the wiser now, I think, because of him.
Thank you for those comments,
Go ahead.
Commissioner. Any other comments regarding unfinished business?
Can
Yes, go
it's
ahead.
not on the agenda because I literally just got the final today, but I just wanted you guys to know that our municipality application to change the PSAR from American Medical Response to the town of North Haven, and the application for the North Haven Fire Department to assume that PSAR has been deemed complete by the Office of Emergency Medical Services as of today. It is now in the hearing officer at the Department of Public Health, awaiting a hearing date for the next 45 days, and it's been submitted to the South Central Connecticut EMS Council for approval and review. So that just came in today, so it's not on the agenda, but I thought I should keep you abreast of that.
Well, thank you, and thank you
Good
for your
job.
effort on that, and Chief, for yours as well.
Good
Chief,
job.
Any further comments?
No.
Okay. Moving on to new business of the fire department.
Two items on your agenda. I need a motion from the commissioners to upgrade a career firefighter, Mitch Newcomer, to grade A, effective 2/28/19. This is in accordance with the CBA.
I'd like to ask for that motion.
I'll make him.
I'll make the motion that we upgrade the fire department, firemen.
Do I hear a second?
I'll
to the
second the motion.
All right, so the motion is to upgrade firefighter Newcomer to grade A, effective 2/28/19. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
The other I had for you is the new recruits that were hired during the special meeting in January. They're progressing through the pre-employment process, and we should have a final determination within the next 2 weeks on their status. That's
Very
it.
good. Discussion of the good of the department.
I have nothing on your agenda for the department.
I'll accept the motion to move into executive
You want
session.
public comment first?
We could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead, we'll go ahead into public comments, then we'll go into executive session, and we'll
That's fine.
continue on with the interviewing.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
That'd be
State
perfect.
interviews that way, yeah.
Whatever you want to do.
Like to open it up for public comments. Any residents? Yes.
Is there a microphone, Mr. Chairman?
It'll pick it up, I believe.
Okay. Sally Blaney, 5 Blossom Drive. Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to be here once again with all of you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. I just had a question, a couple of questions about the budget workshop.
Yes.
On January 19th. I wanted to ask, it came up near the end of the presentation about the 2 new recruits that the chief just referenced. And let me just address Commissioner Zuccarelli's question or comment about the $140,000 that was put in the budget. That was a line item in the 18-19 budget. It was like a contingency. The name of the line item that was created was called Safety Issues, and it was under the Personal Policy Department portion of our budget. And again, it was categorized as safety issues, and the $140,000 was allocated on that line item. And in fact, it's that $140 that's being utilized for the hiring of the 2 new recruits, who I think are, that $140 will pay for them because they're coming in slightly past mid-fiscal year, so that will cover them. So I just had a question about those 2 new recruits, and it did come up near the end of the workshop. And I just wanted to make sure, I've only had the chance to listen to the whole thing on TV once, so I wanted to make sure I got it right, that it's my understanding that these 2, we'll call them the new members, the new hirees, how they're going to be put on one of the 4 shifts. Is that my understanding? Is that
Chief?
what you said?
Correct, yeah.
Correct. And that they'll be so that would put 10 people on one of the 4 shifts.
Correct.
So, and there are going to be 3 on an engine in Monowese, 3 on the engine at headquarters, and so that's 6. So I assume the other 4 would be 2 on the medical rescue unit and 2 on the ladder.
Correct.
That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. So here's my question, and I want to go back in time, Mr. Chairman, a little bit to last year. Because last year was really when this whole notion of hiring more firefighters really came to a head after we had a sort of a tragic incident in August of 2017. There was a lot of discussion. And in last year's budget season, at the budget workshop, 2018, the chief made a very long, well-organized, impressive workshop presentation requesting 8 firemen for the next fiscal year, which is the one we're in now, and then 8 more the following year. And at the request of the chief, I met with the chief and you at Monowese for about 4 hours, probably longer than, it was dark when we left there. And you guys convinced me that we needed more help. And in fact, last year, I was the only elected official that advocated to hire more firefighters, you might recall, after that meeting. And I went to the very next Board of Finance meeting after the 3 of us met, and I spoke at public comment, and I said, we need more guys, yes. 8 is too much, let's do 4. But I was the only elected official that advocated for any. And I had come up with an idea because you and the chief convinced me that the #1 priority is medical calls. We keep hearing statistics, 62% are medical calls. In the chief's report tonight, it was 65%. We need medical calls. And so, in my opinion, the top priority should be, and this is my opinion, I'm not trying to micromanage, you did say that people are entitled to opinions and recommendations.
Absolutely.
So my opinion is that it's imperative that we activate the second ambulance, the second rescue unit. We have 2. They've both been purchased during my tenure on the Board of Selectmen. They're approximately $160,000 to $180,000 vehicles. You folks at home see them, they're called rescue units, but they also have ambulance written on them. Right now, only one is used and the other is a backup, correct?
Correct.
So I was thinking last year, since you guys convinced me of the need for more medical response, since most of our calls are medical, we need to activate that second unit, that second rescue unit. And with 8 men on, there were 2 on the first ambulance, 4 on the engine, 2 on the ladder, right?
Correct.
And so I said, let's hire 4, put 1 on per shift, which would be 9. And I said we could put 2 on ambulance 1, 2 on ambulance 2. I also recommended purchasing a paramedic fly vehicle as the backup in the event that one of the 2 ambulances is out, you know. But let's just stick with the basics. I recommended 2 on ambulance 1, 2 guys on the ambulance 2, 3 on the engine, and 2 on the ladder, so that makes 9. And that was the proposal that I presented after meeting with you guys at the Board of Finance on February 21st, 2018. You came to the microphone, Chairman Nuzzolillo, and you said the following, and I quote, Sally proposed removing 1 firefighter from the engine. In 2010, I'm continuing a quote from you. In 2010, we made a commitment as a fire department and as a town to add a 4th person to that water engine to ensure compliance with federal guidelines. So removing 1 person is not an option for us because we already made a commitment on behalf of the town to have 4 persons on that engine. So we need 8 new firefighters to man another rescue unit to have 2 paramedics on shift. So here's my question. First, last year, my idea to go from 4 to 3 on the engine was no good because it violated federal guidelines according to you. But now, as the chief just said, he's putting 3 on an engine in Montaukese and 3 in an engine at headquarters. So now I'm wondering, why is 3 okay? Why isn't it a violation of federal guidelines like it was when I suggested it, number 1.
Hold on a second.
Hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
And number 2, you said that if we got 8 new firefighters, which would put 10 on the shift,
Yep.
and the chief just said he's putting 10 on only 1 shift because they only got two new guys. And he's going 3 on an engine, 3 on an engine, 2 on 1 ambulance, 2 on the ladder. There's still only 1 paramedic on shift. I hope Mary White is listening because Mary White, bless her heart, has been advocating for you guys for 1.5 years, demanding that we have more paramedics. Well, the way that these 10 people are being allocated on this 1 shift that you're gonna have 10 guys on, there's still only 1 paramedic. There could be a paramedic on one of the engines, but he's not a functioning paramedic if he's not with a rescue unit. Is that not correct?
That's entirely incorrect.
Yeah.
Why? Because
Paramedic
how
can-
come we keep being told there's only 1
Well, because
paramedic?
you're trying to draw back on conversations and things have changed. The 4 firefighters in the engine was, we're talking about staffing 1 engine.
Right.
So it's imperative we staff the only engine that we have in town, staffed with 4. Now we're gonna try to make the best that we can with the additional staff. We're gonna do 2 things. We're gonna staff an additional engine with 3 firefighters, and it's gonna serve as a paramedic. So
How?
the taxpayers are actually making out twice as good as they were.
How is it gonna serve as a, if it's
Because
an
with
engine,
2
it's not an
engines,
ambulance?
it doesn't need to be an ambulance. It just needs to be a paramedic on that engine. The paramedic
We
can
have
still.
paramedics on an engine already.
I'm trying to finish.
Okay, go ahead.
So the paramedic that we have right now is part of 1 engine. So the
Right.
idea is the second engine is a second engine for that purpose. The main engine is still in service with 3 firefighters at all times without a paramedic. The second engine can serve as both a fire suppression apparatus and as a paramedic. The paramedic will go down to the hospital if need be, and the engine will go down to 2 firefighters. But we have a second engine in service in town staffed with 3 firefighters.
And that'll give us the opportunity to have that engine be able to roll in the event, because keep in mind, as you clearly indicated, you're looking at 60% medical calls, 40% fire calls. We need water to be able to get to the fire scene. And because, unfortunately, we don't have sufficient numbers of volunteers during certain times of the day or evening in order to man another engine, that will give us the opportunity to bring another engine to assure in the event during that 40% of the time when there is a fire suppression issue to have sufficient water to fight that fire. So that, and I think
Okay, well-
that is an alternative that the chief
It
has
was
come up with.
reported that there were there were 4,500 calls last year, correct? Or thereabouts, maybe 46? Something close, 46, 70. You reported 35 fires last year. The year before, you reported 19 fires. So it's not 62% medical, 38% fires. There's also accidents, there's other stuff. So to say that there's 1,000 fires is, I think, misleading the public when the chief has reported there were 35 fires last year and 19 fires the year before. My question is, why do we keep being told that there's only one paramedic on duty? If he's, and you're saying that because the one paramedic is on the one ambulance that's activated. That's the paramedic you're referring to when you say there's one paramedic on duty right now, correct?
Correct.
But on, let's say the engine right now that's got 4 personnel on it. I mean, we have 11 paramedics, but you told me once, Chief, that you're one of them and the deputy is the other one. So there's really only 9 functioning active paramedics. Am I remembering your explanation correctly?
It sounds right for the time. It may have
Okay,
changed since then,
So right
yeah.
now, so there are 9 paramedics, but only one is serving, there's 4 shifts, but only one person right now is serving as a paramedic. Even though one of the 4 guys on the engine could very well have paramedic credentials, you're not saying he's a paramedic because he doesn't have all the bells and whistles of paramedic equipment with him that's in the ambulance. That's why he's not a paramedic. How does he become a paramedic all of a sudden on an engine?
Because we have the equipment to staff on the engine to make him operate as a paramedic.
I thought when Mr. Monaco suggested putting paramedic equipment on an engine, you rejected that.
The actually came in as a recommendation to the subcommittee. It was heard at this commission meeting, and actually members from the public actually voiced their opinion saying they don't want to see the only engine in town have a paramedic on it.
They what?
They don't want to see the only engine in town have a paramedic on it. That was a recommendation from the subcommittee. Came back to this commission. We discussed it, I believe, during the December meeting, and that's what was decided on by this commission.
So
That was our only apparatus that had water on it. And by giving up one person, a paramedic that would be on it, if that, first of all, if that person had to leave and go to the hospital and a fire came in simultaneously, we would only have 3 persons on that engine to be able to respond. Insufficient number of personnel to respond to a fire.
With one engine.
With one engine. Now, what we're proposing is, with the additional staff, to staff a second engine that will allow us to do what you proposed initially, but now we have 2 water sources, one in Montouise and one at our central station.
well, let's be clear. It's not that we only have one engine with water right now. We have
We only have
6 engines.
We only have one engine that responds.
Right, that
We could have
has-
100 engines, but if we can't get anybody to drive them there,
I understand, but I want to make it clear, when the public hears you say repeatedly, we only have one engine with water, what you really mean is one engine staffed with career firefighters.
one engine that responds,
Yes,
that's correct.
right.
We are
I just wanna make it
assured,
clear, because everybody sees the engines in the parade. We have lots of engines. It's a matter of,
we are assured
Yeah.
that in the event of a fire,
yep.
one engine will respond. We are assured because they are paid. Now, what
Absolutely.
this request, situation will do is it will assure us that we will have 2 potential engines that will be able to respond to a fire, which is huge from the fire suppression standpoint.
Okay, so let's get back to your quote when you put the kibosh on my idea last year, which reduced the engine from 4 to 3. You said that it was in violation of federal guidelines.
My understanding is that's correct, because what we had done at the time is through a federal grant, a SAFER grant, we indicated that we would man that engine with 4 firefighters, and that's what we committed to with the federal grant, in order to have sufficient numbers of personnel in a water or apparatus. We will still be able to be in compliance at this point, because now we will have 2 apparatus, and actually we would have more personnel responding to a fire. Am I correct with that,
Right,
Chief?
so what you were, I think you were alluding to is the fact that the grant application at the time was built around the fact that there was 1 engine.
Correct.
That's not going to be the case anymore. We're talking 2 staffed engines.
Well, the grant application is long expired.
No, you're right, but that's, I
It's
believe that's what.
irrelevant.
But we only had 1 engine at the time.
Last year, you clearly, I'll use your favorite word, clearly, you clearly stated that going from 4 on the engine to 3 was not only a violation of federal guidelines, but a violation of our commitment to have 4 people on an engine.
And that's correct.
But that's what we're doing that now twice. We're having 3.
No.
But we're going to have a second vehicle, a second truck that
Right.
will have water, and we will have additional personnel that will be able to respond to the fire. Look, what we talked about last year was 1 specific engine. Now we're speaking about 2 of them. And we have the opportunity to run it down to the 3 when we have 2 engines that have personnel on them.
Okay?
I mean, we don't have 2 engines with personnel on them right now.
I understand that.
Okay.
But let's get back then to the paramedic issue, because, for a year plus, we've been told, with the 8 men per shift, 2 on 1 ambulance, 4 on an engine, 2 on a ladder. Even though there could be more than 1 trained paramedic on that shift, there's only 1 paramedic, because there's only 1 paramedic on the paramedic vehicle, the ambulance.
That's correct.
So if that was the problem, that we only had 1 paramedic, because we only had 1 vehicle with paramedic equipment, why didn't we put the paramedic equipment on the engine earlier, and then therefore be able to say to the public, we do have 2 paramedics?
We would have the same problem that we had been talking about. We would lose that paramedic in the event a medical call came in, and our engine would be run down to 3 people, and it would be insufficient numbers of persons to respond to a fire.
That would be the case anyway, but wouldn't it be preferable for him to have had the paramedic equipment? Because not every call for EMS results in a trip to the hospital. I would say about, what percentage, Chief? About 10%, I would say.
To the hospital? Oh, no. It's probably more like 10-20% that don't result in a trip to the hospital. The majority do go.
The majority go to a hospital.
Yeah.
I thought you had once told me last year at our meeting that about 300 trips per year go to the hospital.
Oh, you're referring to our staff then? I thought you meant general calls in
No,
general.
with our staff.
Yeah, so we railed in last year about 300 times.
Right, and we
Yeah.
make approximately 3,000 medical calls. That's why I said.
Okay,
about
so I just
10%.
what you're saying now, yeah,
So
okay.
only about 10% of our medical calls we go somewhere. I'm trying to,
So you're-
specifically.
You're looking at this, and you're kind of looking at this call by call at a time, when you got to
Yeah.
look at the number of firefighters that we staff on shift and are available to respond to a fire. So what's changed now is you're looking at, instead of having 8 firefighters in total that hopefully are able to respond, you're looking at having 10 now in total. So it allows us some flexibility in where we can staff a paramedic and what we can do with staffing of apparatus. The fact before that the current engine with 4 couldn't run down is because we also try not to deplete away from how many firefighters are left to go to a fire.
Right.
So with the addition of additional staff now in 1 shift, we can afford to be able to move some guys around and change what they can do, because we're still going to have a higher number of firefighters to go to a call than we do currently right now.
Right, but, and you said you're going to put paramedic equipment, I would assume, on the engine in Mount Louise?
Correct.
And would that be the equivalent of all of the paramedic equipment that's in that big, huge
Yes.
trailer?
Yes.
It will, because I thought that when Mr. Monaco, the chairman of the Board of Finance, had recommended putting, I could have sworn I heard you reject his idea of putting paramedic equipment on the engine?
On the current engine,
On the current
with 8
engine.
of staffing, with 1
Okay.
engine staffed, yes.
Okay, well, in my opinion, because so many of our calls are medical, okay? And I understand that, I understand there's a lot of reasons for it. It just seems crazy to me that we're not using both of our engines. And I'll give another example why, both of our ambulances. And I'll give another example why. Near the end of the January 19th workshop, the chief was asked about the engines being in for service so often, so much. And he said, because our engines are out so much. And he said, in other towns, the engines go out once or twice a day. Our engine is out all the time. That's because our engine's making medical calls. I think that we should make every effort to limit the number of medical calls that our $750,000 pieces of equipment are making. Not only to help with their longevity, but we've got 2 $180,000 fully stocked ambulances, and only one is being used in a town where we have 62%, possibly even 65, according to tonight's report, percent of calls are medical. It just seems,
So
you know, and again, I'm not micromanaging, I'm recommending, it just seems crazy to me to have 2 ambulances and not use them.
Can I just put a scenario in your head for a moment? Just play along
Sure.
with me. You may have recalled one of the things I said during my budget workshop was one of the things that scares me most is a fire coming in and engine 1, our currently staffed engine, not being available. So to me, how foolish would it look then if we staffed the rescue at Montaouise and engine 1 was tied up somewhere in town and not able to respond, and the rescue that carries no water at all pulled up to a fully involved house fire on the Montaouise side of town and had to wait to go in and couldn't do anything? The rescue that you're alluding to that we should be staffing on the south side of town, responding to a fire on the south side of town and having to sit there and wait until an engine arrives to do anything at all.
Well, I'd rather save a life first than a house.
But that's how foolish does that look and how bad does that look for the department that we chose to staff a rescue because of cost instead of...
Because we have so few, you know, Mr. Monaco kept arguing about percentages a lot, and I understood his argument, and I'm gonna make the same one. Because we have so few fire calls and so many ambulance calls. I would like the first medical call to have an ambulance go out, and the second medical call have an ambulance go out. And keep our engines in the fire station where they belong.
What the chief is indicating is that the paramedic will be on the engine. So the paramedic will be in Montaouise, will be going out on medical calls and providing the paramedic services. If that person needs to go into the hospital, they're going to go in with AMR. We don't transport.
I know.
So you say we have 2 ambulances. We have 2 rescue vehicles that transport our paramedics, but we do not transport.
Oh, I know, but they say, I know we don't transport.
It says ambulance on them.
Yes, we're applying for the PSA, I understand that, but I'm trying to, I know that they don't transport.
But we are going to be able to fulfill, I believe, what you're advocating for. We're going to have a paramedic working out of headquarters, and we would have a paramedic working out of Montaouise off of an engine, and in the event there's a fire, that engine is going to be able to respond to the fire with water, whereas if we had a ambulance or a rescue vehicle in Montaouise and there was a fire, we would not be able to respond with any water. So we're going to be able to perform the duties better by now having 2 water apparatus engines, one manned with a paramedic, and the other paramedic will be certainly in a rescue vehicle at headquarters.
Okay, but I guess for me, I still, you know, as the chief said when he was asked about, you know, why the engines are breaking down, and I mean, we just bought a $1 million ladder truck a few months ago.
$1.2 million.
$1.2 million, okay, thank you. And we've got $750,000 coming up at a town meeting to approve another engine. There's a grant for another 700 plus, or 600 to 700 plus engine, and then another request for a used engine. So, you know, we're buying all these engines because in my opinion, we're using them too much on medical calls.
We're buying them because we have 25 and 30-year-old engines that haven't been bought for years.
Well, let me make
so those monies haven't been spent forever.
I know, but
and that's why they're breaking down. There's a photo on Facebook with one of our engines on Elm Street with the cab open that had been broken down for 2.5 months. It's a 25-year-old engine, and it just doesn't. They don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, granted, we need to replace those.
Chairman, you know very well that in my 5+ years on the Board of Selectmen, that I voted in favor of every purchase that has come before me.
Absolutely have. I appreciate
including the
that.
one a couple weeks ago.
I appreciate that.
I understand that.
Yep.
And I understand the need for them, but maybe we shouldn't be using them on medical calls so much so that we don't, you know, I mean, it's not just the 25-year-old ones that need replacing. There's a 5-year-old one that's not working, you know. So that's my point. I just would rather have ambulances used on medical calls than engines.
Well, look,
it just makes sense to me.
I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your what makes sense to you.
Yeah.
As I clearly indicated before, I believe that our 65 years of senior management experience in the fire services have the skill and expertise to coordinate and identify what equipment needs to go where and when for the best interest of the town. I think everyone, as I said before, could certainly have an opinion, but the ultimate decision is the senior management of this department and certainly this Board of Fire Commission. This is what we're elected to do as well.
Yes.
I certainly appreciate all of your study and your research and your comments and support.
Yes,
I truly do.
I also I also immediately supported, after the Defco Park fire, the immediate replacement at the town expense of all of that equipment.
Yeah,
so let's be clear, so that you know the folks out there, you know, don't think I'm against your department.
And I want you to realize,
I think we clearly indicated you're not.
Yeah,
You know,
and I have done tremendous amount of research to educate myself. You know that.
Absolutely.
I don't want to sound
Just so
dismissive.
I brought this up once before, because someone complained to me about the ladder truck going out all the time to medicals.
It's crazy.
Well, it's because, I found out, the only time you'll see that happen is when there are 2 other medicals going on at the same time.
Right.
So,
I understand that.
Well, that goes to show you how many medicals we got going on. When you see that ladder truck at a medical, that means there's 2 others that are being sent someplace else. It's a last resort.
You've just made my point, Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well,
You've just made
that's-
my point
that's
for
the
using
point.
2 ambulances.
Mr. Chair, can I say something also?
I'm not quite finished with
okay.
my public
Oh, I was going to say it to you. No. Okay, go ahead.
And according to
Go ahead, please.
Robert's rules, I
Yeah.
must address all my
Please, go ahead.
comments to you. And now I've lost,
Oh.
I lost it, thank you,
All right.
Peter.
Well, if someone else has a
I
thought, you bring
apologize.
it- yeah, you
I
think about it.
apologize. I apologize.
I
You're
wanted
welcome
to
to come back.
just bring up a couple of other things that you guys talked about. First, Commissioner Criscola said that, you know, was a little critical of Mr. Hallahan's comments at the workshop, and he said, and I quote, Mr. Hallahan suggested no paramedics at night. Mr. Hallahan never said no paramedics at night.
I didn't say that.
What he and Mr. Monaco advocated for was a sort of a weighted day duty, an additional paramedic during the workday, when many, not all, but many of the simultaneous calls come in. He never advocated for no paramedic at night. He was advocating for an extra paramedic during the workday. I want to make that clear. And one more comment on the plan review money that came in. You know, it's been since November of 17, so about 15 months. I believe the revenue is about 1.2 million. Is that close, Chief?
Yeah, I don't have the final number with me tonight. I can go back
The
and I can
last
find
numbers
it.
I saw were 1.2.
I kind of stopped referencing it only because the current fiscal year number is more important at this point than anything else.
And that's what I
yeah.
wanted to comment on, because it should be understood clearly, again, your favorite word, Mr. Chairman.
Not necessarily.
Clearly understood.
Not necessarily one of my favorite words, but go ahead.
watch your meetings, you use it all the time.
I never do.
It's endearing, sir, it's endearing. It is clear, I want to make it clear that $850,000 of that 1.2 million came in one check from Amazon. So when Mr. Criscola said that we're taking in $100,000 a month in revenue for plan review, that would only be true if we build a 1 million square foot structure every year, and we're not going to do that.
Of course not.
So I think, so, you know, let's not mislead the public. That 1.2 million is primarily because of one big check of $850,000 from Amazon. Do not expect that revenue flow every time. I still can't think of my other follow-up that I had on the ambulances, but I'll try to think of it, and maybe someone else could speak. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, can I answer something?
Hold on 1 second.
I don't want to,
Chief.
I just don't want to appear as dismissive. What you're saying about why can a rescue go and why does an engine have to go, that's the same argument being heard all across America. I mean, so, you know, as fire leaders, we'd read about that. That's a constant concern from taxpayers. So just, you know, your concern and your question is a valid question, and I did my best to answer it. So that's our concern.
Well,
We're trying to serve as
hope-
dual function.
I would hope that no matter what happens in the future, that a ladder would never go on a medical call again unless there's a fourth.
It's going to depend on call volume, really, yeah.
But, you
Right.
know, and as you know, I've requested some statistics
Yep.
from you.
Yeah, we'll be in
And
touch.
I'm still awaiting those statistics for my own evaluation of simultaneous calls. But what is your sense of the 26% of simultaneous calls that you reported at the workshop? What's your sense of how many of those simultaneous calls are Monday through Friday during the workday?
So that was one of the things I haven't gotten back to you in a couple of days since you emailed me, was our current data program doesn't have the ability to pull that out like that.
Okay.
It doesn't. But
Okay.
there's a reason why I selectively, in my workshop, just for you, I selectively referenced a few different samples of calls to show that it occurs on a Saturday, to show that it occurs in the middle of the
Yeah,
night.
of course.
So I mean, and that was in a couple of week period.
Right.
So, you know, I don't have a number
Right.
for
Well,
you.
last year at the workshop, you gave 4 examples of simultaneous calls. 3 of them were on Monday through Friday during the
Right, that's why you didn't do
workday.
that this year.
Yes. I know it is.
Mr. Chair, can I say,
You think I haven't figured that out? But, you know, working with statistics is a dangerous game, is it not? But-
Yeah, depending on how you look at it, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still feel very strongly about putting the second ambulance. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. You're not gonna like it. I am against manning Monowese 24/7. One thing that hasn't changed in our town is the size of our town. We could argue all day about population and density and economic development and the age of the population and why there's so many calls, but one thing that will never change is we're 21 square miles, and that's all we are, that's all we've ever been. And for a town with well, our population, believe it or not, is actually going down. The last 3 years, according to a report issued by the Board of Finance, the CAF, are you familiar with the CAFA report, Mr. Chairman? The last CAFA report that was just issued last month came out with some demographics. In the last 3 years, our population has actually gone down. It's now back down under 24,000. But anyway, you know, there are so many towns. I've studied every town in Connecticut within 5,000 of our population range, and I've studied their fire departments. I've talked to chiefs, I've gone to websites, and all of them, except one, which is Weathersfield, all of them are much larger than ours, and they all have one headquarters. And I just do not see the need and the expense that goes in with utilities and opening up the whole, you know, everybody has this Amazon money spent already, and we don't even have it yet, and it just kills me, because we have so many other expenses, and, you know, you guys are just dealing with the fire department. I'm dealing with all of the departments, and I wish there was a way to accommodate an increase in providing medical services, because I do believe in it. Again, I was the only elected official last year who advocated for more firemen. I do believe we need more, but I only think we need 4, and they should be 1 per shift. And I am against opening Monowese.
Okay.
Thank
Can I
you.
Just-
respond?
yeah,
Please
just
let
to-
me respond to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you live in Monowese?
Yes,
And your office is right next door to the fire department. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I live closer to the center, but I'm on the
Okay.
borderline between
Well,
the center
there's,
block and
as
Monterey
you
Center.
well know, there's a 76-unit piece of property on 12 acres of land in Montelese. And God forbid if...
On
one-
Middletown Avenue, Lexington Gardens?
Right. If one of them goes up, they're all gonna go up.
Yep.
Because there's no way, and I live right next door, there's no way that a fire apparatus is gonna be able to navigate those streets. So it takes, I think the chief said, 12 minutes to get from headquarters to Montelese.
Then why did the site development get approval? I mean,
Well, I rest my case, Your Honor.
The fire marshal is always supposed to
Well, this was done
evaluate
before,
roads for turnaround and
there's-
backup service.
Well,
I see, it's
this
our
was
fault.
done before. This was done 5
Done
years
before?
ago.
Right.
5 years ago.
Okay.
Before this crew was here.
Okay.
And don't,
But
I don't know
The
why.
requirement of plan review and the
That's right.
the fire chief has been around for more
You
than 5
preach
years.
it to the choir. Because if I had my way, that thing wouldn't be there.
I remember
Because I have
hearing
them,
you- I remember
I have them
watching
staring in my kitchen. And I had to go for an $8,000 fence so I could get my wife back. But that's another story. But, you know, there's a lot of people in there.
I'll say.
Too
And
bad.
there's a lot of kids in there. And they're not elderly, they're young couples that have young kids. And they are so close together that if one goes, my fear is that a bunch of them are gonna go. So I would feel more comfortable having people in Montelese able to respond quickly than to wait 12 minutes to get from headquarters down to Montelese. But we're talking opinions, that's
I
mine.
thought we had a 6-minute average of,
Well-
6 minutes and 36 seconds.
It is a 6-minute average for calls, but it's a 12 to 14-minute response to that side of town. So,
Okay.
as you know how averages work, most of our
Averages
calls
are
are around
averages,
here.
right. Another could be,
And that would be my
an average could
opinion.
be the most misleading number of all.
Sure.
Great. Any other
you.
public comments?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Nancy Barrett. Not quite as well-known as Ms. Bundy here, Selectman Bundy. But I have been a 25-year resident of North Haven, and my husband and I have lived here and raised 3 children. I've worked in the healthcare industry for over 30 years. I'm trained as an EMT, and in fact, Scotty was one of my teachers. So I have a great deal of respect for all first responders. So I just want to say that right off the bat. And I just also want to know, you to know that I've gotten involved both with the Board of Education, and in doing so understood that you can't understand the Board of Education without then attending the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen meetings, and then commissions such as this, to really understand how all of the different pieces of the puzzle come together
Correct.
on an annualized basis. So I will say the same thing to this commission that I have said to the superintendent of schools, to the first selectman, and the heads of several different departments. Regarding your reactions to both the workshop as well as the Board of Finance subcommittee, and their comments, suggestions, criticisms, I strongly recommend that, as passionate as you are about the fire department, that you should not take questions personally. They're not intended to be personal attacks. Comments such as, I resent a comment, or I'm offended by the Board of Finance subcommittee, suggestions that, you know, somehow either the chief or this fire commission don't know how to do their jobs. That is never the implication. The attempt by the Board of Finance is to do their job. Just as you're doing your job, they are asked, what should we finance, what should we not finance on an annualized basis? And as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that is a very difficult task. And in order to do so, they're trying to make informed decisions. So I have to applaud Mr. Monaco and Mr. Hallahan for rolling up their sleeves and working with the chief and the deputy chief and with this commission to really try to understand the decisions that are made in order to run this department. I have to applaud them. They're trying to work within the confines and the constraints of the financial implications of every line item. And I think they're just trying to make the best outcome for this town, as you all are as well. So, so the notion that you can just say, trust us and just fund whatever we say, that's just, it's not gonna fly for this department, it's not gonna fly for any department. And I can assure you, the heads of other departments in this town are very highly qualified to do their jobs. And they also have to defend any line items, any requests that they make to the Board of Finance. So, in looking at the organizational chart for the town of North Haven, the chief reports to the first selectman. And this board has a dashed line to the first selectman. So it is not like you operate independently. You have to report both within the organizational structure, and we all have to operate within the recommendations of our Board of Finance. So both they should be able to ask questions and make suggestions, and any citizen, including myself, should be able to ask questions, make suggestions, ask for answers to our questions, and it shouldn't be taken personally, and should be taken as we're all just trying to work together to make our community better. So, I do just have a couple of questions for the chief. So, one is, when do you think the FEMA grant should be announced in terms of the grant that you've submitted for both the new fire truck and for the like $100,000 in equipment? When do you think that should be announced?
That's $1 million question right now, because the government shutdown has affected all of it.
Just about?
Yeah, it really is. You know, I haven't heard. There's a peer review panel that takes place, usually takes place in Baltimore. It's somewhere down in that area, where they review all of the grants. I don't know that's happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the government shutdown has had an impact on it. I say that only because today I saw an email from our FEMA representatives for the grants who said, hey, we're back at work finally, thanks for the shutdown. So I don't have a better timeline. I hope by next meeting I'll have some idea what we're looking at. Typically, those awards start around May and carry through till September. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a month or two further behind this year.
Okay. So somewhere between May and September.
Yeah, so if you go on the website, you'll see that every Friday, there's a list of departments that are awarded grants. If you go on FEMA AFG Awards and just pick the year, and there's a PDF file to show you every department's been awarded money, and it always happens on Fridays. They pick 10 to 30 of them on a Friday and dish out the money.
Excellent, okay. And you mentioned both simultaneous calls and overlapping calls. Can you just define what that means exactly?
So if I refer to that, I'm referring to one and the same, simultaneous and overlapping calls.
So is it like within a certain time frame, or they exactly overlap, or they overlap by 5 minutes, or?
Nope, so it would be a matter of, so take the dispatch time of one apparatus and the on-scene time, another call occurring in that period of time, that another apparatus is on
So
scene.
between dispatch and on scene?
Right.
Whatever that may be?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Let's see.
I think I emailed.
You did. That's one of the things I can answer for you when I get my response
I think I
back.
emailed that same question.
You did.
Uh-oh.
Okay. And in your reporting of total number of calls, do you exclude, I don't even know what the terminology is, but like improper dispatch, meaning you're sent out, you know, and it was a mistake at the level of the dispatch?
I don't, and I don't only because they've never been excluded, so the number's relevant, more or less. So every year, that's always been accounted for, so if there were 30 in one year, there's 30 again this year, let's say, whatever that number is. So they've always been included.
So dispatch error is included, and
Right.
is that the only type of false alarm, or are there other types of
It's
false
the
alarms?
only type of false alarm that results in no apparatus responding typically. So it would be the dispatcher in error creates a fire alarm number, and there shouldn't have been. That's far less than it ever has been before, but nonetheless, it does happen. But again, it's happened every year all along, so the course is still trending up.
Right. Because the overall total number of calls, even if it's broken down by EMS, motor vehicle accident, and fire, it's somewhat misleading, because there will be calls, probably many more for fires than for medical calls, in which you get on scene and you say, oh, okay, this is nothing. You know, you just need to, shut off your boiler, open the windows, and, call your furnace company or something like that. But
Correct.
It's not as big a deal. And so there must be some index of events that require firefighter intervention. in some way, shape, or form, either providing medical services, fire attention, or extraction from motor vehicle accidents.
So in a way, that number is there, you just kind of have to pull it out differently. So the 60 to 65% of medicals that we're doing, the balance of that, these fire calls, the reference was to 35 building fires. So as you start kind of ticking away at that, you can start accounting for what those other calls were.
Right, but again, those are total number of calls, and I
Right.
assume of the 62 EMS calls, most of those actually require taking care of a patient.
Correct.
Whereas the 31% that are fire, the actual number of fires winds up being like 100. So it's not really 1,447 fires, it's
Right, it's
like
not
10%
35
of that.
fires, right? When we say
Right.
35 fires, you're referring to 35 fires burning within a house, so more or less a house fire of sorts. Everything else can be car fires, leaf fires, transformers on fire, various other items that would be within that remaining 40% roughly.
right, but the actual number, 31% is responding to a fire, but the actual number of fires is 35 building fires, 27 vehicle fires, 79 fires within a building. So that's actually only like 140 fires. So it's really 10%
Okay.
of the total number of fires. So I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is the actual number of events where the firefighters need to be engaged as opposed to just called. Right.
So part of that though too is not, I guess it just depends on what you're trying to get out of it, because remember that when we're dispatched for a fire, we're never dispatched for, we know it's a false alarm, just go anyways.
No.
So the intervention, if you ask,
Sure.
is still a matter of assembling the appropriate response to go, but it's a matter of pulling that data out, which can be done. It can be done.
Right, okay. Let's see. And does AMR, as the holder of the PSAR, have to report the response time for the calls that they accept?
So we ask that they do, but they are currently not.
So they're not obligated by their contract?
There's no contract. So I certainly don't want to brush you off, but I really don't want to get into a conversation about AMR or the PSA right now. We are current day in hearings, so they're watching this, I'm sure.
Okay.
And so I can certainly talk to you offline where it's
Okay,
approval in private.
No, we can talk about that separately, that's fine. And then, let's see, you mentioned the estimated tax impact for North Haven taxpayers of added firefighters. Now, does that include overtime, the equipment, or additional vehicles that you would have to purchase if we increased the total number of
So
staff?
there'd be no additional equipment, no additional overhead to speak of any significant value. The lights are on the majority of the time at Montauk anyways. I mean, that type of thing.
No, I
The
meant
building's
like
always heated.
personal firefighting
Yeah,
equipment.
no, it doesn't, but we can, that was, if you recall, part of the equipment that was asked for was with the, to be able to start replacing equipment, the PPE, the structural firefighter gear, so that would be included in that. The overtime is not included. It would be a cost that we'd have to incur over the period of time. The intent would be that a new firefighter has far less ability to take time off than a firefighter with 30-plus years on. So the hope would be that over the course of the next few years, as you get your 30-plus year members retiring, you are making up for that with the new individuals you're hiring. It's all weight-based on seniority. So it's a hard number to calculate so much in advance like this, but it's nonetheless, it's something that we'd have to look at over the next couple of years.
Right, and does it include benefits?
It does include benefits, yes. So the $120,000 per firefighter is a number that is all inclusive of benefits, the number that was provided by the town administration.
Okay. Because at least for 2017-18, the fraction of the total compensation for full-time firefighters that overtime comprised was 30%. So you would have to tack on, in theory, an additional 30% to any estimate of additional firefighters in order to really come up with something.
Not necessarily, because the current overtime calculation is based on the overall seniority of the department, which
No, I
obviously
understand.
has a much higher contractual time off allowed versus new hires that have really very little. So it's not a straight 30%, 30%. It would be 30%, maybe 5%, maybe 10%. But again, as I'm looking forward the next couple of years, especially if we look at hiring firefighters the next several years, we're anticipating retirements as well to help balance that out.
I see, okay. And let's see, there's one other question. So if we were to only approve 2 additional firefighters, as has been approved this year, and continue that, what impact, if any, would 2 firefighters have on the fire department bandwidth and ability to respond specifically to medical calls?
So 2 in addition to the 2 for this current year?
Well, let's start with just 2, and
Right.
then let's say 4.
So the intent would be that shift by shift, start making each individual shift staffed with 10, and start being able to run that shift with 2 engines, and one of those engines serving as a paramedic engine. So we'd be able to, in theory, if you were to hire 2 every year for 4 years, let's say, be able to run the balance of the entire department with a second paramedic and a second engine.
I see. As I recall from watching the video recording of addressing each of the points that was recommended by the Board of Finance Subcommittee, one of the reasons that the weighted duty recommendation was dismissed was that somehow it was somehow discriminatory in that what if somebody had a medical event prior to 2 paramedics coming on shift or after 2 coming on shift, even though they were potentially covering Monday through Friday, let's say 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, something like that. Now, aren't you saying the exact same thing here? By incrementally increasing, you're really only affecting 1 shift
Correct.
of the 4, so 25% of the shifts.
Still 25% of the week.
So the probability of somebody having a medical event and not being able to address by this is not being addressed. Is that right?
There's no way to do it with the 2. You'd have to hire 8 in order to do it. So no matter how you staff 2, whether it be Monday through Friday, whether it be, there were other reasons, if you recall, that the Monday through Friday was something that I don't support, and I'm not going to speak for the commission. It was a matter of continuity of officers. It was a matter of being able to have the same staff on that report to an officer, because right now 4 shifts report to 4 officers. It's a matter of renegotiating the contract as well, which I'm not confident would be successful in doing so. So those are all of the factors that would impact the Monday through Friday. Putting 2 firefighters on 1 shift, there's nothing to negotiate with the union, and there's continuity with the officers. But yes, you're right, we do still have that when it doesn't happen on that shift, as is when it doesn't happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That variable is still there.
Because I looked at the histogram that you provided of over the course of 24 hours when calls take place. And of course, I had to kind of eyeball it.
Yep.
But from what I could gather, it looked like between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., about 66% of all calls came in. And between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., about 55% of all calls came in. So I would love to be able to see how that plays out just for medical calls. But at least for all calls, it looks like there is a big chunk that occurs in that 1 shift that could be covered by 2 weighted day duty paramedics. And it would be kind of a surgical scalpel way to approach, and I don't mean to tell you how to do your job, but a very precise way to address a problem very specifically, very quickly, and very economically, is to address it during the time that it happens, and with 2 people who are dedicated to just medical calls. Because if 62% of your calls are coming in for medical calls, shouldn't you have 62% of your availability to address medical calls?
So if you recall, it's not just a matter of medical calls. The firefighters are being hired to respond to. They're being tasked with fires and medicals.
No, I understand.
So the intent would be that they respond to both, not just medical calls. I look at the same histogram, and I can identify an 8-hour period during the day that seems as distinguishable from one from another. The next 4 hours before or 4 hours after. It would be an 8-hour workday, and there's still a great deal of volume of calls that continues to come in, even into the evening hours. And if, as you recall, if you watched the workshop, one of the things that we talked about was the inability of volunteers to respond even in the overnight hours. And if you think about it, while the volume of calls may not be as intense during the day, overnight as it is during the day, the severity of the calls is that much more intense. So it's that much more important to have the number of staff available to respond. Therefore, we're looking to staff the 2 firefighters in every shift.
Right, but you can only do that incrementally over a long period of time.
Right, yeah, no different than if you were to staff right now, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, let's say, and then you identify, okay, yeah, we're still having calls we're missing in the evening, now we're gonna run an evening shift, a day shift, and a 24-hour shift. We're gonna have, 3-4 different work schedules in the department. It doesn't work. If the intent is to make a long-term goal to address the 24-hour needs of the department, 4 shifts at a time, then we can't have multiple different working schedules in the department. So it seems at first, yeah, we can throw the 8 guys at the Monday through Friday. If you recall to Saturday and Sunday, though, too, there was really not much of a decline in Saturday to Sunday calls, so we're not addressing Saturday and Sundays if we address Monday through Friday. And there's not an easy way to then hire the next 2 guys and schedule them. I mean, we have to negotiate then an evening schedule as well. I mean, it's too convoluted and it doesn't work.
Right, except that it's 2 people across 5 days versus 2 people 1 shift. So,
yeah,
I think that's the hard part, is really trying to figure out, and I think that we all need to put our heads together in order to come up with, the best solutions here. And I certainly trust your experience base as the fire chief, but I think that this is something that really does require both business acumen and people that have had to deal with this kind of thing in other industries. I know in the healthcare industry, they certainly have to deal with peak flu season and overlapping shifts and trying to double up on specific days of the week or shifts or times of the year in order to address increased demand. So I think that there just has to be some way to be able to address this quickly and efficiently so that the medical calls are really become the main focus.
There is, we could hire 6 additional firefighters this fiscal year.
I don't think that that's going to be financially feasible.
But that's the way to do it. We can't keep looking at cutting services and so forth. It's got to be a matter of if we're going to address the real needs of the town in emergency services, and it needs to be something that's done 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Public comments? No?
Pat, can I just answer a couple of things, please?
No, let's...
I just want to, but I want to answer a couple. Just a couple, that's all. Sally, first of all, I do want to thank you. You do vote for us all the time, and thank you. I want to thank you for voting for us and appropriating funds for our department. I do want to thank you for that. You are right up there, up front, and you are the first one. I just done a couple of quick things. No, the town has not grown. It's still 21 square miles. The only difference that up in Brockett Farm area, I guess, is that what you call that area up there, Chief?
Yeah.
That used to be the farm, Kachowski. Well, they had 1,000 cows. Now there's 5,000 people up there now. So we do have to get fire suppression and we do have to get medical attention up there much quicker than we did 15 years ago because they had cows up there. Now there's a beautiful, probably the most beautiful development in this town for that area. Lexington Gardens, where Mike said, you asked how come it got by the fire marshals and plan review. That started out to be a 50-plus unit complex. The town took them to task, went to court, got beat. He wound up doing 70-something units. Am I correct, Mike?
76.
76. And still building. So that's why, though they got it tweaked under the guidelines of making everything so tight that, God forbid, there is a problem there, like Mike said. There's a house on top of each other. They're 20 feet apart. I mean, we're 20 feet apart to the wall. That's how far the houses are. So that takes care of that. If I did allude to the fact that there's no paramedics at night, that's not what I meant, and I apologize. What I meant was, we're only going to have the same one. We're not going to have 2. So you can't say, well, at 5 o'clock, we're going to send home the paramedic shift for the day shift, If you have a heart attack at 5:15 and there's 3 of us are out, we're out. So this is why we need to have the second engine, and like the chief said, putting on a second engine, yes, we depleted from 4 to 3, but now we have 2 engines, so we have 6 men on 2 engines. So we have more coverage for the people, and we're able to do both medical and fire suppression at the same time. The use of the engine that you're saying that breaks down, you're 100% right. It breaks down more than it should. It's a new, is it 5, 6 years old, the engine, 7 years old? It breaks down 5 years, and it breaks down more than it should. And you know why? Because no one took the time to listen to the chief. We have a plan. We have to start now to buy an engine 2 years from now, because this engine is going. Everybody kicked the can down the road. And then one day the engine went, and we took the first one that was in stock. We took a stock engine. Wasn't made for this town. Wasn't made for the hills. Wasn't made for how we operate in this town. So it's not because we overused the engine. It's not the proper engine for this town, unfortunately.
Well, overuse was the answer that the chief gave.
Yeah, it's over.
He said
It's an
other
overuse.
towns' engines only go out
Right.
once or twice.
They don't have the
In our
calls,
town, they're out
right.
for
They don't have the call volume that we have.
So-
Right, they don't have the call volume we have. But again, whether it comes out or not, that engine that we have, it's not the chief's fault. He wasn't the chief. It wasn't anybody's fault. We just bought one. We just bought one that was available to us because we ran out of time. We didn't have to pick and say we want this size engine power with this size rear end to go up these kind of hills this many amount of time. So that's the only breakdown that I like to
It was a
say.
bad purchase that cost the taxpayers $750,000.
But it wasn't our bad purchase. It was because the Board of Finance didn't give us the money to start with, and we had to buy the first one available. Now we can move on.
We need to move on.
Yeah,
Any
let
other?
me just say, a lot of towns our size have the same number of calls. Well, our town is not unique in a call volume.
Okay. Any other public comments? Here are none. I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. I'd like to reconvene the Tuesday, January 29, 2019 North Haven Fire Commission meeting. We have a motion to be made. Mr. Rowland?
I make a motion to
Roll.
appoint Vincent Stanamaro as lieutenant at West Ridge Company 3, effective immediately for the remainder of the 2-year term ending December 31, 2020.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
I'll second that. Okay.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. This commission has just conducted 2 interviews, and we will be making a conditional, send a conditional letter of acceptance to one of the candidates. Please, Chief, be kind enough to make that happen. And I thank you, commissioners, for the amount of time that you spent this evening. Any further business coming before this commission? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.